إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون هو سواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم إن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشاء نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلمون نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أحد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله مولانا العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم الفاتحة مع الإخلاص والصلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآله
محمد وآل محمد صلوات याद आती है वफा है दरेसानी तेरी मश्क के साथ रही तीक्ष्णदानी तेरी किस बुरे वक्त में टूटी तेरे भाई की कमर کس برے وقت میں ٹوٹی تیرے بھائی کی کمر، مل گئی خاک میں عباس جوانی تیری، شاہ خیمے میں لیے جاتے ہیں کیا مشک و علم، شاہ خیمے میں لیے جاتے ہیں کیا مشک و علم، نہ سنی جائے گی زینب سے کہانی تیری، آج تک تیری وفاؤں کا اثر باقی ہے، آج تک تیری وفاؤں کا اثر باقی ہے، ساتھ تابوت کے رہتی ہے نشانی تیری، چھد گئی مشک سکینہ تیرا دل ٹوٹ گیا، چھد گئی مشک سکینہ تیرا دل ٹوٹ گیا، موت آئی کہ بہا مشک کا پانی تیرا، آج تک تیری وفاؤں کا اثر باقی ہے، آج تک تیری وفاؤں کا اثر باقی ہے، ساتھ تابوت کے رہتی ہے نشانی تیری، یاد آتی ہے وفا ہے در ثانی تیری۔ سورۃ مبارکۃ الفاتحہ۔
Dr. Dongersi, Sheikh Bilal, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight's niyaz was sponsored for the Ithar Thawab of Marhuma Dr. Zahra Panjwani, Marhuma Rubab Chattu, Marhuma Zahra Chattu, Marhum Hassan Chattu, Marhuma Shakira Chattu, Marhuma Ayman Chattu, Marhum Ahmad Ratansi, Marhum Mujtaba Ratansi, and all Marhumin of Panjwani, Alibai Ratansi, and Chattu families. Niyaz was also sponsored by Sister Fatima and Brother Muntazir Durrani for Ithal Thawab of Marhum Muhammad Raza Durrani, Marhum Ghulam Hussain Manji Somji, Marhuma Zahra Bai Hassan Ali Bank, Marhuma Nargis Bai Tijani, Marhum Ghulam Abbas Ratansi, and all Marhumin. It was also sponsored by Bande Khuda for the Ithal Thawab of all Marhumin. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. Tonight's Surah Yasin was sponsored for the Ithal Thawab of the Marhumin displayed on the screen. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It is with great sadness that we share the news of the demise of Marhuma Mrs. Kaniza Zahra by Muzaffar Ghulam Ali. She was the aunt of brother Ainullah Hamza of New York. Marhuma passed away in Dar es Salaam. Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha. On Saturday, October 30th and Sunday, October 31st, Al-Mahdi Center and the Mizan Institute will be hosting a special program titled The Secrets of Salat. The program will be held in person here at 83 Ludi Street and will be led by Sheikh Mahdi Rastani. For more information and to register for the special program, please visit mizaninstitute.org/New York. That's mizaninstitute.org/New York. Tomorrow, Thursday, we'll begin our Shab-e-Jummah program at 7 p.m. with namaz. On Friday at 1 p.m. we will begin Salatul Jummah. On Sunday at 8 a.m. there will be a majlis at Rose Hill Cemetery. At 10:45 a.m. madrasa will begin in person for classes 9 to 11, and all other classes will be online. At 7 p.m. we will have our program of the wafat of the Masuma Yaqum alayhi salam, starting at 7 p.m. with namaz. We've also received a request to recite dua for a small girl who is undergoing surgery, so if you would please keep the young lady in your duas moving forward. Thank you. We remind you to please continue using your masks and practicing social distancing. In addition, please avoid littering in and around the center and dispose of your masks in the trash cans. Lastly, let us please recite the ayah of Amma Yujib 5 times for all those who are struggling here and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-muttarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته صلوات على محمد وآل محمد Another صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
Seems like it's been a while since I've done this, huh? Leave. It's not meant to be. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلنا منهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات الله محمد وآل. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. salli ala Muhammad. And your loudest salawat as condolences to the master of our time, Sahibul Asri wal Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب آل Muhammad. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. Tonight, which marks the 29th night of the month of Safar, is one of the dates that is associated with the shahadat of our 8th Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And as such, inshallah, there's a very important discussion to have about his imamat, and we'll just split our discussion tonight into two parts. One is something that inshallah will return to what is the tradition of our scholars from history, which is that the discussion, and whenever we have an opportunity together to discuss some of the mubtala bih masail, some of the important affairs of fiqh that are associated with our day-to-day responsibilities, that are associated with issues that we come across in day-to-day environment. And after that, in the second part of our discussion, we'll move to discuss the imamat of our 8th Imam and some of the benefits that we gain from him. As inshallah we'll be starting, this is a relatively new tradition that it'll be part of our majlis going forward inshallah, and we'll try to make it an effort that various issues that we face in day-to-day life we go through. Today, very briefly, I wanted to mention some of the mustahabbat that are associated with the visiting of the grave. That one of the recommended actions for every believer, as we've mentioned before, is that the visiting of the grave is something that helps us control our desires, helps us keep focus on our purpose in life, gives us a responsibility of when we associate with the world to know perspective of what's important and what's a priority. When we find ourselves getting lost in this world, when we find ourselves caught up in our environments, it's something that helps us ensure that my goals, my perspective makes sense. I keep in mind why I have been created, what I need to do with my life, and I don't get lost. From amongst the mustahabbat is also the visiting of the grave, not simply for my benefit that it helps me keep myself in perspective, but that the grave is a place of loneliness, and it's from amongst the recommended actions that even Sayyidah Zahra asked Imam Ali to visit me in the grave. That it's one of the places that if Sayyidah Zahra is asking Imam Ali that come visit me when I'm buried, it's one of the places that we know that our deceased relatives benefit from our visiting, and that it keeps us connected to them. Now, first and foremost is that we've discussed this as well, but again as a reiteration because it's appropriate to the topic, is that even if I can't visit the grave, remembering the deceased, reciting Fatiha for them, reciting and sharing them in the thawab of any mustahab action that I do is beneficial to the deceased, no matter where they are in this world. But that the visiting of the grave is one of the recommended actions, and there are actually times where it becomes mustahab to visit the people in the grave. And there are a series of times that we've collected from the riwayat on this issue that explain to us times that are good to visit the grave. Now, when we say that there are times that are good and mustahab to visit the grave, it doesn't mean that there are other times that don't go visit the grave if it's not this time. No, visit whenever you can, but try to build a priority that if there is added thawab to go at a particular point in time, I take advantage of that additional thawab. From the riwayat, we see that on the day of Monday, it is mustahab to visit the deceased. From the time of Fajr until the time of Maghrib, any time on the day of Monday, it is from the mustahabbat. On Thursdays, it is mustahab to visit the graves. Again, from morning till night, the entire day is recommended to visit, but especially Thursday afternoons, between Salat al-Asr and Maghrib, to go and visit the people of the grave is one of the mustahab actions. Amongst, again, the days and times that it's recommended is Saturday. But on Saturdays, the morning of Saturdays, to go and to visit the people in the grave. The narration comes that our leader, Sayyidah Zahra, salamullahi alayha, used to visit her uncle Hamza, who was the first Sayyid al-Shuhada, the first master of the martyrs in the religion of Islam, was this uncle Hazrat Hamza. And Sayyidah Zahra would go to visit his grave on Saturday mornings. And that Saturday mornings, it's one of the times that it's recommended in that morning time to go and to visit the graves and to spend time there and to sit with them. It's also recommended on the day of Friday to go and visit, but on Fridays, it's recommended between the time of Fajr and sunrise. And again, in the afternoon, Asr to Maghrib, that these are times where it's recommended to go to the graveyard, even on Friday. Now, when we go to the graveyard, there is a secondary etiquette of how we behave and what do we do at the graveyard. It is not recommended to have worldly discussions. It is not recommended to laugh when you're at the graveyard. Why? Because the people who you are around, they may be going through difficulty, they may be going through challenges. They have seen the reality of the test of Allah. And that when we sit there and we make light of it, or if we get caught up in these worldly affairs and we're laughing at that time, it could be deemed as a sign of disrespect for them or a source of pain or difficulty for them, that I go through difficulty and you stand here and you laugh by my grave. It's recommended that when we go to the graveyard and you go to visit someone's grave, that better than standing by their grave is to sit by their grave. And when you go, to sit in such a way that you are facing Qibla when you are by their grave. And that if I want to recite something, that I should put my right hand on the grave and then recite. From the recommended things to recite when visiting a grave are the following items, which are amongst the mustahabbat, that when I go to visit a person who is in their grave, I sit by their grave. The riwayat indicate that these are things that are beneficial that I should recite. First and foremost is that I should recite Surah Fatiha 3 times. And then Ma'udhatain, which is Surah Falaq and Surah Nas, to recite these 3 times each. And then to recite Ayatul Kursi 3 times. And then to recite Surah Qadr 7 times. Now, my mentioning these in this order doesn't mean that you have to recite them in this order. It just means that the riwayat have given ta'qeed of these are the items that we want to cover. Surah Fatiha 3 times, Ma'udhatain, Surah Nas and Surah Falaq 3 times each, Ayatul Kursi 3 times, Surah Qadr 7 times, and once Surah Yasin. So yes, Surah Yasin that we recite at the grave is very good. It's one of the muta'akkid riwayat, the certain riwayats that this is one of the mustahab actions that we can do. When we go and we sit by a grave and a person, it's not simply that we should only recite these verses, but even when we go and we sit next to them, to even speak to them, there's no harm in it. And as a matter of fact, that's one of, again, the things that we can do by the grave is to talk to a person and to understand that while I can't hear their reply, that they can hear me. That Allah, inshallah, gives them the ability that they can interact with me. To speak to them about good things. Not necessarily to go and unburden our heart to them. Why? Because that person who may be already in a state of difficulty, who is already going through the separation from us, we sit there and we announce our problems to them. Better is still, is that we sit there and we talk about the good things, we remind ourselves of good things that we should be doing, good practices that they've given us in life, good relationships that we've had with them, and by the wasila of those good relationships, continue to remember them in our prayers and our du'as as time goes forward. Inshallah, we'll continue this practice of mentioning some of these items that are important for us and beneficial that don't quite fit into any other format right now that we need to talk about, and we'll continue this practice of having these conversations. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today's discussion around the imamat of our 8th Imam has a very interesting conversation that there are 2 points that we want to address about the life of this Imam. 2 very important points of inflection that come into play during the life of this Imam. The first is the breaking apart of the Shia at the death of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. That after the death of Imam al-Kadhim, not just normal people, but some very prominent people separated from the religion of Islam and separated from the love of Ahlul Bayt. For example, one of them, Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Bazanti. Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Bazanti was one of the close companions of the 7th Imam. And when we look in the books of hadith, there are over 800 narrations that come to us from this Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Bazanti. But we see that after the shahadat of the 7th Imam, after the shahadat of Imam al-Kadhim, this person becomes what was known as a waqafi. Meaning that they said, we don't know where the imamat goes after him. As a matter of fact, we're not even sure that he was shaheed. We stop in the silsila of imamat and we don't go any further. Another such person was Abdullah ibn Mughira. Abdullah ibn Mughira, again, one of the people in our own fiqh, in our own hadith, He is someone who is known that everybody accepts his hadith, and he is in over 590 different hadith. He is mentioned as a narrator. But after the death of the seventh Imam, he's someone who initially said, I don't know where Imamat goes, and he turned away from the Imamat of Imam Rada. Now both of these, alhamdulillah, eventually did come back to the path of Imam al-Rada, and they eventually believed in him, but initially they refused to believe that Imam Rada was the Imam. So the question that comes from this, that when we see such prominent characters stepping away from the path of Ahlul Bayt, was it something that was difficult to determine who the eighth Imam was? Was it something that was complicated and unknown to society where the silsila of Imamat would go after Imam al-Kadhib? And to understand this, we will learn about how Imam Rada was associated with this matter and correcting this issue. You guys are with me? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When we see such prominent characters, when we look at history and you start looking at the pieces of history and you start putting it together, these questions come up very logically. That I have these people who are so prominent that they're listening constantly to the word of the Imam, and then all of a sudden, they don't know who the Imam is anymore. They don't know where the silsila of Imamat continues. The question should be logical, and it should be something that we analyze, that we take a look at. You see, to you and I, we've inherited the condition of Imamat and we've accepted it, that there are 12 Imams and these are their names. For us, it's mutasallim, and we were told from generation to generation to generation, this is your Imam, this is your Imam, this is your Imam, and we said, okay. But those people who lived in that time, those people who were at the time of these changes were happening, it was a very difficult process sometimes. However, what's interesting is at the Shahadat of Imam al-Kadhim had spent a great amount of time, which was different than his predecessors, to announce to society who the next Imam would be. Imam al-Kadhim had done this both through ishara, through pointing at and foreshadowing, and then at times clearly saying where the silsila of Imamat would be. When, for example, he did something through ishara by pointing at it, he, for example, sat down with Ali ibn Yaqtin, and he said to Ali ibn Yaqtin, who was one of the reliable companions, he says to Ali ibn Yaqtin that this son of mine is Sayyid Awladi, is the master of all of my children. He is the most noble of all of my children. Remember something, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far had 37 children, had 19 sons. So Ali ibn Yaqtin being told that this is the master of all of my children, هذا سيد أولادي, was a significant point. But Hisham ibn Hakam says that Ali ibn Yaqtin, when he left this meeting with Imam al-Kadhim, he came to me scratching his head and he says, the Imam said something to me I don't understand. Hisham ibn Hakam says, what do you mean? He says, my Imam said to me that this son of his is Sayyid Awlad. It's the master of his children. Hisham ibn Hakam is the one who uncovers it for Ali ibn Yaqtin. He says, Ali, you don't understand. The Imam is telling you where the silsila of Imamat will go after him. The Imam is pointing to you in the dangers of the time that are present so that there's no doubt for you where the authority goes after you. There are other instances where, for example, when one of the money collectors who was known as Dawood al-Sarrafi, who was one of the collectors of the khums of Imam al-Kadhim, comes to Imam al-Kadhim and says, Yabna Rasulullah, here's the khums that I've collected. Imam al-Kadhim says, hold on to it. Dawood says, why do I need to hold on to it? You're the Imam, you take your amana. I don't want to trust your amana. Imam al-Kadhim tells him, oh Dawood, if after I leave this world, if someone comes to you and demands this khums from you, know that he is the Imam of your time. So Imam Musa ibn Ja'far was clearly telling people and indicating to them that the silsila of Imamat would be going to the one who had the authority to collect the khums after him. And he would be the one who himself would say, give the amana my father entrusted you to me, to show that where the Imamat would go. There were other companions who would say, Yabna Rasulullah, this son of yours, we love him, we smell from him the smell of Nabuwat. And Imam al-Kadhim would tell them that he is to me as I was to my father. Explaining, he is to me as I was to my father, to show that this is where the direction of Imamah was going. There were times where the Imam could not clearly make this statement and announce it, so he gave people these instructions through his signs to understand where Imamat would go after him. That if you saw the children of Imam al-Kadhim and you were unsure who to follow, he made it clear in this way. Eventually there came a time where the Imam did not even do this secretly, he did it openly. Where there's narrations that he collects 17 of the Banu Hashim and makes them swear an oath of allegiance to follow his son, Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida. Then he goes and he collects from the children of Abu Talib and the Quraysh, and he makes them swear that they will follow the authority of Imam al-Rida. Then he goes into the city of Medina next to the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he makes the people of Medina swear that they will follow and give allegiance to Imam al-Rida after Imam al-Kadhim. When the Imam has taken all of these steps, how is it possible then that people didn't know how to recognize the Imam after Imam al-Kadhim? Now, when we look at this, there are 5 ways of understanding, or 5 possible ways that we can understand why people were confused by this affair, and why they didn't understand the imamat of Imam Rida. This is the first test of the imamat of Imam Rida, that he becomes the Imam, and the mu'mineen, the Shia, begin to separate and fall away from him. And the Imam has to now collect them and gather them again. When we try to understand why, when there were so many clear and authentic proofs, did people not follow Imam Rida? As a matter of fact, amongst all of the A'immah, the one Imam who possessed the most clear proofs, or one of the most clear proofs of his imamat, from the children of Imam Ali, from the children of Imam Hussein, was none other than this Imam Rida. When we refer to him, Assalamu alayka ya shams al-shamus. My peace, my salam upon you, O sun from amongst the suns. One of the explanations that some of the ulama gave is that we call him Shams al-Shamus, that his imamat was clear to us like the sun is clear before us now. That this is how clear the matter had been made in front of the mu'mineen. That his imamat was like the sun, in the sense that there was no doubting in his imamat. So then how did it happen that people fell away from the imamat? First and foremost, we have to understand that not every affair that is clear, everybody accepts it. Look today, if there are atheists present in this world, you ask someone who believes in Allah, do you believe in Allah? He'll say, it's as if it's clear as day before me. And yet there are people who refuse to acknowledge that Allah is present. You talk about the nabuwat of our Prophet. You ask a believer, do you believe in his prophethood? And he'll say the same thing. It's very clear that this is the Prophet and authority of Allah. And someone else will look at the same matter and say, no, it's not clear. When Allah wants to guide a person, an affair becomes light and clear in front of him. But sometimes we ourselves get in our way of recognizing the authority of Allah and what wants to be seen. The same way that there are those who doubted, though the affair that Allah is present is clear and apparent in front of all of us, people who won't believe it. Though we may say that if we learn about Rasulullah and his miracles and his status in the Quran, we can't doubt except that he was the Prophet of Allah, people will still come and doubt it. In this way, though Imam Musa ibn Ja'far had made great effort that no one should doubt where the authority of Allah goes after him, there were some people who refused to accept it. They couldn't see the clear affair in front of them. The second reason that we see that maybe they had split apart is that not everyone was honest with their faith. There were those people who looked at faith as a way of gaining a benefit. They were not sincere and truthful in their love of Ahlul Bayt. They were interested in the material wealth. That because Imam al-Kadhim spent a long period of time in prison, they gathered wealth in his name. And now that they had to give up that wealth, they lost their sincerity. They lost their love for Ahlul Bayt. The greed overtook them. A third reason for why it would be possible that people didn't follow the example of Imam Rada and didn't believe in his wilayat is that while the affair was made clear, maybe the news didn't reach some people. It wasn't like today, where whether it's truth or a lie, WhatsApp tells you everything. I see, as I say it, news is coming now, Shaykh is not telling the truth. There you go. It's not like today that information was readily available. It took a long time for information to reach people. Some people didn't get the news, and when they were told by unreliable people, or they were told by one person. And when that news comes from an unreliable person, maybe we would turn around and say, no, it's not true. Unfortunately, it's happened to me in my own life. That someone, when they presented me with the news that, for example, a young man passed away, the first thing I said, why would you lie like this? Why? Because a child was beloved to me. I don't want to accept the news that he's gone. And only one person has brought this news to me. I would say it's more likely you made a mistake than this child died. I'd rather believe that. The same way it's possible that for some people when news reaches them very rarely or very sparsely or from unreliable sources, rather than believe that their imam was dead, they said that maybe you're wrong. Maybe the imam is alive. In this way, there were some people who, because of this reason, that when the news reached them, they didn't accept immediately, and it took them time. It took them time to come back to the path of Ahlul Bayt. A fourth reason where it's possible is that people, when they looked at the proofs that they felt were in front of them, they doubted. They tried to use their logic to say that we know better. We know better than the imam making his claim. And this is something frightening because it's happened in history many times. And one of the points that we discussed this affair in our majlis today is that we are waiting for the coming of an imam, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. And we want to ensure that by studying the A'imma before him, that when his authority in the Hujjah is presented before us, we don't become those people who by our logic defy and refuse to accept that the Imam has arrived. As a matter of fact, there are riwayat that tell us that from amongst the believers, there will be groups of people who, when they are approached with the fact that the Imam has come, they will say, the signs aren't complete yet. No, this sign I haven't seen happen yet. And they will refuse to accept the authority of the Imam on this basis, that they will say, my logic doesn't accept it. They did the same thing to Imam Rada. How? There were two main sticking points that they got stuck on. One, they said that you, O Ali ibn Musa, were in the city of Medina, and your father was in the city of Baghdad. And we have yaqeen that no one can do the ghusl of an imam except an imam. And since none of the family was present with Musa ibn Ja'far, we refuse to believe that he's even died. He must be alive. This was one. The other, they said, okay, we can believe that an imam is present, but it can't be you, Ali ibn Musa. And they would say, well, Imam Rada, they would say, why can't you accept that Imam Rada is the imam? And they would reply, because he has no children. We know that this issue of imamat goes until 12. And this one that you're telling me is the next imam, he's now reached into his late 30s, but he has no children. Imam Rada lived for 55 years on this earth, according to most narrations. His son, our 9th imam, was born at the age of either 46 or 47. Meaning Imam Rada had no children. Amongst the Ahl Sunnah, they narrate that maybe he had 5 children or other things, but our ulama clearly, without doubting, say that he had no children until this one Imam al-Jawad. And the people said, how can one become an imam who has no children? Look at his forefathers. They had not one child, but many children. And now you want me to accept him as an imam? And they used their logic to come to the conclusion and say that this can't be the imam. The fifth reason, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That these people, they wanted to have more authoritative authority over them. That, how could this happen? How could this happen? How do we know? The Khalifa says something, you say something else. We don't know where the situation is. We don't believe any of this news, and we will keep doing what we were doing before. Whatever we saw our forefathers do, we'll continue that process. If they said Imam Kazim was alive, I'm going to say Imam Kadhim was alive. In this way, the people brought abject confusion, and they started to separate and break apart from the path of Islam and break apart from the Ahlul Bayt. The first thing Imam Rida had to do was gather the people back together. And he did this through three methods. The first is that he presented them with logic. And he brought logical answers to their conclusions and to their problems. The first thing he did was to say that if you believe that, and he was like, it's true, an Imam has to do the ghusl of Imam. He says, then who did the ghusl of my grandfather, Imam Hussein? They said Imam Zain al-Abidin. He says Imam Zain al-Abidin was, not only was he in Kufa and not in Karbala at the time of the burial, he was also in prison. They said, yes, but Allah presented a miracle where he went from Kufa back to Karbala and he buried his father. So Imam Rida would say, the same Allah who gave the miracle to my father Zain al-Abidin gave me the miracle that I left the city of Medina and buried my father in Baghdad. Two, when they would bring the condition, they said, you don't have a child. He said, inshallah, you will see that Allah will give me a child. And Allah will give me such a child that there will not be one like him who has been born in the religion of Islam before him. This is one of the sifat, the qualities of Imam al-Jawad, that Imam Rida describes his son. He says, I will have such a son that one like him was never born before in the religion of Islam. And he told them that, yes, a son will come to me. My life is still continuing. Before I go, an Imam will come. In this way, he presented logic. Two, he also presented miracles. Many of the times that one of the things that we learned about an Imam is this aspect of him answering and providing information from the unseen. After the issue of Imam Rida, one of the things that we know is that people, when they would question who is the Imam of the time, one of the ways that they would determine this is the Imam, is that when they would present, for example, khums before him, they would bring it in a pouch. So for example, I wouldn't send my khums directly. There would be a naib who would collect the khums of an area and send it to the Imam. Now when I give my khums to the naib, I don't put my name on the outside of the envelope. I would sew my name on the inside of the pouch and then sew the pouch shut. And then this naib would go, and when he would present the khums before the Imam would touch it, he would tell you who the khums was from, what amount of money in it was from halal sources, what amount of money in was from haram sources, what should be returned and what should be kept. This practice of demonstrating the unseen became one of the authentic proofs of determining who is the Imam. To the extent where at the shahadat of our 11th Imam, his brother Ja'far made the claim to be the Imam of the time. Because the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Zaman, was hidden. He was not available to the people. So the people after the shahadat of the 11th Imam, they also looked to see who is the Imam. They wanted to know where is the Imam. Some people said that Ja'far, the brother of Imam al-Askari, has laid claim. They said, okay, then we will test him to determine if he is truly the Imam or not. And the way they did it is they presented these pouches of khums before him. And Ja'far said, thank you very much. And he said, wait, hold on. This is history. He said, wait, tell us who these are from. Ja'far looked at the pouches. He says, you're asking me to tell you the unseen. I never claimed that I know the unseen. And they said, thank you very much, then you're not the Imam, and they walked away from him. In the same example, when they went to Imam Rida and they would ask him questions, or they would approach him to want to know that is he truly the Imam would show them his miracles of explaining matters that were unseen to them so that they would see the miracles that were present from the Imam. The same way that each of our Imams has presented miracles. When we take a look at the life of our 7th Imam, his matter of Imamat was one that was hidden because Harun had threatened to kill the next Imam. So when people wanted to know, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far would say, be silent, I will tell you I am the Imam, but don't reveal it or this will happen. They would say, how do we know you're the Imam? Imam Musa ibn Ja'far would motion at a tree and the tree would come over, bear witness to the Imamat of Imam al-Ja'far and then go back to its place. The same with Imam al-Jawad, who began his Imamat at the age of 8. That when people questioned him, are you the Imam? One was his miraculous and amazing knowledge that was inappropriate for his age to have. That an 8-year-old can't have this knowledge. The other was that he too presented miracles. When they said, Yabna Rasulullah, if you are truly the Imam, present us with a miracle. They said Imam al-Jawad at the age of 8 had a staff in his hand. He says, here look, the staff turned into a serpent like the staff of Musa and bore witness that this is the authority of Allah on this earth, and then went back to being a staff right in his hand. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In this way, the Imam presented through both logic and intellect that his authority was absolute, and he presented through miracles. The third thing that the Imam used was his own companions and those who were the authorities amongst the people and were known as authentic people in this community. He told them to go out and to educate the others, to educate those who didn't know, to share with them the righteous information. Remember, we said some people didn't receive the information on time, therefore they didn't believe. The Imam went and instructed, go and instruct them. And he instructed them, go and debate with them and present our proofs and authority. These three tools the Imam used, and then when it happened that still some people wouldn't accept the Imamat of Imam al-Radha, that now the Imam set the next example. Now we have to preserve the tradition of the Ahlul Bayt. That now we need to ensure that no one looks at these people and say, this is the Aqidah of the Shia. And then he created separation between these Waqafi and between the Shia. He gave the instruction after these tools were used to say if they still don't accept, then you have to separate with them. Don't sit with them. Don't marry into them. Don't attend their janazah. Keep away from them in such a way that it becomes clear that if this ideology exists, that it is not the ideology of the Shia that teaches this concept of separating from Imamat after Imam al-Qadhim alayhi salam. This way the Imam created a boundary around and a protection from the start of his Imamat to preserve the message of Islam and to ensure that the true message of Islam could be found amongst the people. And there were still people, for example, there are even tribes who just refused to accept the authority, who refused and said that we don't understand how this could happen. Authentic people. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bani Faddal. The Bani Faddal were from authentic followers of Ahlul Bayt who after the Shahadat of Imam al-Qadhim separated. And they were narrators. This whole family was narrators. The father and the sons were all narrators of hadith of Ahlul Bayt. And when they refused to come back to the path of Ahlul Bayt, Imam Radha explained a very important concept. That for us, when we take a narration from someone, we don't necessarily have to validate their aqidah. We have to validate, are they a truthful person or not? Do they tell the truth? If they are truthful, we can take from them. We don't have to question their aqidah. In this way, he gave the explanation that these Bani Faddal, when people came to them and said, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, these Bani Faddal refused to accept your status, but they gave us narrations from your father and your grandfather. They narrated from Imam Sadiq, they narrated from Imam al-Qadhim. What do we do with these narrations? Imam Radha explains, خُذْ مَا رَوَوْا وَأُتْرُكُوا مَا رَعَوْا. He explained, accept that which they narrate from us, but don't listen to what they narrate from themselves or what their opinions are. Take the narration from them, but don't take their opinion from them. To explain, to say that the most important aspect that we need to pay attention to in this consideration, and which is why we can still have authentic hadith, though the person may not have the aqidah of the Ahlul Bayt, is as long as they weren't a liar, we can take a narration from them. In this way, Imam protected the religion to say that if we can't push them away, then that which is haqq still exists within us. This is one of the important concepts that Imam Radha ensured that the message that you and I receive today is true and pure. The second point that we talk about in the life of Imam Radha. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. You guys aren't tired, are you? Few minutes, not much. Few minutes. Is this relationship with Ma'mun and becoming the Na'ib of Ma'mun. That amongst the Ahl Sunnah, some came to the conclusion that said that because Ma'mun made Imam Radha his Na'ib, that he was a Shia, that he loved Ahlul Bayt. And as a matter of fact, that's not true. And we know that's not true when we look at history. That this Ma'mun was truly someone who hated the Ahlul Bayt and tried to destroy and decimate the Ahlul Bayt. To understand this challenge that Imam Rida faced in his life, we look at a little bit of history. Harun, the Khalifa, who was at the time of Imam Sadiq, Imam al-Kadhim, had two sons. One was named Amin, and the other was named Ma'mun. Amin's mother was an Arab, so Amin was 100% Arab. Ma'mun's mother was Persian. When Harun died, he gave the Khilafah to Amin, and Amin became the Khalifa of all of the Muslims. Ma'mun didn't like this. So within 5 years of his brother becoming the Khalifa, he overthrew and killed his brother and took the Khilafat for himself. Now when Ma'mun took the Khilafat, the Arabs didn't like that the Khalifa over them was half Persian. And Ma'mun had a problem now where his empire wanted to dissent and break apart. Ma'mun had to figure out a way to keep everything together, and his only concern was, how do I keep all of these people together? Now what was happening was, in the Arab areas of Mecca and Yemen, that those who loved the Ahlul Bayt had now understood that these Banu Abbas were oppressors as well. And that they were only going to oppress the people and they weren't going to take care of them, and they started to have uprising against the Khalifa. At the start of Ma'mun's Khilafat, there are uprisings of the Shia in Mecca and Yemen, and they are trying to overthrow the authority of Ma'mun, who they saw as the Persian outsider. And Ma'mun goes to suppress these uprisings, and he sends his general by the name of Isa ibn Yazid al-Jaludi. And he sends Isa ibn Yazid al-Jaludi to go and suppress these uprisings, and after he has these uprisings suppresses, he sends this Jaludi to go and sack the city of Medina in the life of Imam Rida. And famously, this Jaludi was told to go sack the city, including there's no respect or honor reserved for the children of Zahra, and included. One of the things that we know in history is this Jaludi tried to sack the house of Imam Rida as well. But when he came to the door and he brought his soldiers to the door, Imam Rida was present in the house, and he refused to let them enter the house and to frighten and scare the women. And he said to them, what do you want? He says, I want to loot your house as well as I have looted the rest of Medina. And Imam Rida said, then I will bring to you whatever is inside of our house. I will leave nothing out from what is in this house, and I will give you everything. And all of the wealth that was in the house, all of the earrings from the little girls in the house, all of anything that was possessed, Imam Rida gave with his own hands and said, leave from here, don't disturb us. When we talk about the Masa'ib of Ahlul Bayt, don't imagine that after Karbala it was peaceful for them. No. They too went through great difficulties, whether it was the burning of the house of Imam al-Sadiq, the imprisonment of Imam al-Kadhim, the taking away of Imam Rida from his family. The Masa'ib upon Ahlul Bayt continued. The children of Imam Rida going forward were all prisoners from the Khulafa of one way or another. Including this incident, which famously told us about this Isa ibn Yazid al-Jaludi, who tried to sack the house of Imam Rida. And the presence of Imam Rida is what the poets narrate, and they say that this was one time the door was not burned. This was one time when the ears were not ripped. This was one time when the women of Ali Muhammad were not frightened. That Imam Rida protected them. This Isa ibn Yazid al-Jaludi has an interesting history himself, right? Because Ma'mun first gives him the instruction to go sack the city of Medina. And Isa ibn Yazid al-Jaludi sacks the house of Imam Rida. And then 3 years later, Ma'mun says, this Ali ibn Musa Rida is your Khalifa, Naib Khalifa. And everyone has to give the oath of allegiance to Imam Rida, including this general of Ma'mun. Now, you guys want to hear something interesting? This is interesting. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And after this, we'll move to our conclusion quickly. When Imam Rida commanded everyone to give the bay'ah to Imam, when Ma'mun commanded that everyone give the bay'ah to Imam Rida, this general of Ma'mun refused. He says, you told me to sack his house, and now you're telling me to give him my bay'at. At that moment, Ma'mun was sitting in his court, and Imam Rida was sitting next to him. when the general is refusing to give bay'ah, that is an act of uprising against the Khalifa of the time. The consequence of this is the punishment of death. As Jaludi is realizing that he's standing up against the Khalifa and he's worthy of punishment, Imam Rada leans over and whispers into the ear of Ma'mun. And he says, Ma'mun, be lenient with him. Don't punish him severely. Don't give him the full punishment. Now this Jaludi can't hear what Imam Rada is saying. But he has animosity towards Imam Rada, so he says to Ma'mun, Ma'mun, this one has animosity to me. I insist you do exactly the opposite of whatever he tells you. 100%. This is tariq. 100%. He says, I insist you do the opposite. Ma'mun is like, you're sure? He says, yes. He says, then for you is the death penalty. He asked for me to be lenient, but since you say do the opposite of what Rada says, for you is death. Isa ibn Yazid al-Jaludi is killed by Ma'mun. That's one who sacked and threatened the women of the Prophet, is killed in the court of Ma'mun by the hands of Ma'mun. This Ma'mun, his move of bringing Imam Rada into the court was to try and consolidate the power, that the Arabs would appreciate him the way the Persians did, and that the empire would stay together. But the problem that happened was that the nobility of Imam Rada was such that he could not control and limit the nobility of Imam Rada. And that as more and more people learned about the character of Imam Rada, the more and more they saw the foolishness and uselessness of Ma'mun. And they decided that we need to get rid of this Ma'mun however we can, because he has done many foolish things, including bringing the enemies of the Khilafat into his own house, who are the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. Imam Rada, when he was taken from Medina, this too was a point of masa'ib in his life, that they say that we saw again in Medina what we saw when Imam al-Hussein left Medina. They said that this Imam Rada went to the grave of Rasulullah not once, but over and over again, like a child running to his mother. And he would beg that, is there no way that I can stay with you, Rasulullah? The people witnessing, they wept the same way we saw once Hussein, when he was forced to leave Medina, wept at the grave of his grandfather. The same way today we see Rada weeping at the grave of his father. This separation from Rasulullah, the masa'ib of Ali Muhammad begin with the shahadat of Rasulullah. What we have experienced yesterday is every tear that is shed after this is because that tree under which the shade was given to the Ahlul Bayt was uprooted from this world. And after it, there was nothing but pain and discomfort for the Ahlul Bayt. That Imam Rada sits by his grandfather's grave and cries that I don't wish to leave this land. They've separated us from you so many times, Ya Rasulullah. And they took Imam Rada alone and they made him Gharib al-Ghuraba, the stranger amongst the strangers. To the point where at the time when Ma'mun decided to kill Imam Rada, he had but one servant with him who was loyal to him, Aba Salt. And when he was called into Ma'mun, he says, Aba Salt, if I come out and my head is covered, then know that my time has expired here. When he goes in to see Ma'mun and he is served either a poisoned pomegranate or poisoned grapes, he takes but a few seeds of this, and Ma'mun insists for him to take more. And Imam Rada replies, "Oh Ma'mun, your goal has been achieved." Ma'mun feigns, he says, what is my goal? He says that you want me to leave this world, your goal has been achieved, and I have reached that point. Imam Rada leaves with his head covered, and Aba Salt begins to weep and cry that, "Oh my Imam, I am the only one who is here with you." When Imam Rada returns to his house, Aba Salt locks the doors. He prepares a comfortable place for Imam Rada, but Imam Rada says to him, "Oh Aba Salt, remove these covers you've placed for me. Remove this place of rest you have made for me." Aba Salt says, "But Yabna Rasulullah, you are in a state where you are going through this difficulty of death." He says, "But for a moment I want to lay on the ground like my grandfather Hussein ibn Ali. I want to lay on the ground." Yabna Rasulullah, Ya Imam Rada, you lay on the ground, but there was no horses that were running over your body. There were no enemies who were stabbing at you with spears. Yabna Rasulullah, you laid on the ground by your choice. It was Hussein ibn Ali who was pushed from side to side with spears, who was shot with an arrow,
that poisoned his liver, that threw him from his horse. Imam Rada says, "Oh Aba Salt, if there is a young man who comes into this house, don't be surprised. Let him come to me." A few moments later, Abbas Salt says, "I saw that a boy had entered into this locked house. I said, 'Where did you come from?' He said, 'My Lord sent me to my father,' the same way that Allah sent Zainul Abidin to Aba Abdullah." When this young man, he comes to Imam Rada, it is Imam al-Jawad, who's seeing his father in the condition of death. They say he threw himself at the chest of his father. He lay on his father and wept until Imam al-Rada bequeathed to him the remainders of Imamat, bequeathed to him all of those things that were from the inheritance of the Anbiya. And after that, the sweat of death overcame his brow. His breath became shallow. His hands began to move and close from the pains of the coming of death. And then Imam Rada left this world. When the janazah exited the house, all of Tus came out and they covered this janazah with roses. What's very famous is that the janazah of Imam Rada, when it was taken to be buried, they had laid roses on the janazah of Imam Rada. This was another difference. Yabna Rasulullah, ya Imam Rada, your janazah is covered with flowers. Hussein ibn Ali is the one who was covered with arrows. Imam Zaman describes my father Hussein, who when he fell from the horse, he had so many arrows in his chest that he was neither on the ground, nor was he on his horse, but he lay on a bed of arrows. The Mu'arrikhin write it was Zainab who, when she visited her brother, that she first pulled the arrows from him and asked, "Anta akhi Hussein." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز العجل الأكرم. With tears in our eyes we raise our hands. Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud بحق محمد, Ya A'la بحق علي, Ya فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة, Ya محسن بحق الحسن, Ya قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Ya Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to the marhumeen of the sponsors of today's majlis, our marhumeen, all those who have passed away and are in need of dua. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, those who have come here with sickness and whose families are in sickness, and the mu'mineen around the world who are sick, Ya Allah, give shafa'ah to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, the mu'mineen of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, wherever they may be that are suffering through insecurity, Ya Allah, give aman to the believers wherever they are. Ya Allah, keep us and our children on the upright religion of Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman and entitle us to the shafa of Imam al-Hussein in dunya and in akhirah. Matim Hussein.
शाहे खुरासान का आता जनाजा है, पीटो सरहले अज़ा, आता जनाजा है। फातिमा के घर से ये निकला ये ताबूत ضرورت ہے رو اہل عزا آتا جنازہ ہے آگے ہے اب اصل کھڑا روتا ہے سر پیٹتا کیسا غضب ہو گیا آتا جنازہ ہے شہر خراسان میں مارے گئے شاہ دین ویران مدینہ ہوا آتا جنازہ ہے اہل فلک ساتھ ہے سر کھلے جبریل ہے شور یہی ہے بپا آتا جنازہ ہے مامون ملعون نے زہر دیا شاہ کو روتے ہیں آج مصطفیٰ آتا جنازہ ہے یوں فاطمہ کہتی تھی بھیا میرے پردیسی یوں فاطمہ کہتی تھی بھیا میرے پردیسی یہ کیسی خبر پائی بھیا میرے پردیسی یوں فاطمہ کہتی تھی یوں فاطمہ کہتی تھی بھیا میرے پردیسی یہ کیسی خبر پائی بھیا میرے پردیسی مرنے کی تمہاری یہ کیسی خبر آئی ہے مرنے کی تمہاری یہ کیسی خبر آئی ہے دل ٹکڑے ہو گیا ہے بھیا میرے پردیسی یوں فاطمہ بھیا میرے پردیسی یوں فاطمہ کہتی تھی یہ کیسی خبر پائی خوش نکلے تھے وطن سے پھر آئے نا وطن میں، خوش نکلے تھے وطن سے پھر آئے نا وطن میں، کیسا سفر ہوا ہے بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی تھی یہ کیسی خبر پائی، مہمانی کے ہلے سے بلوایا تھا ظالم نے، مہمانی کے ہلے سے بلوایا تھا ظالم نے، مارا تمہیں دگا سے بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی تھی یہ کیسی خبر پائی، یہ کیسا ستم ٹوٹا گر فاطمہ کا لوٹا، یہ کیسا ستم ٹوٹا گر فاطمہ کا لوٹا، خالی ہوا مدینہ بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی تھی یہ کیسی خبر میرے پر، میں ذکر کیا کروں اب تم مر گئے بھیا، میں ذکر کیا کروں اب تم مر گئے بھیا، زندگی نہیں بچی اب بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی تھی پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی تھی یہ کیسی خبر پائی، اب جا کرے مدینے اب جا کے مدینے میں بھیا کروں وہاں کیا، اب جا کے مدینے میں بھیا کروں وہاں کیا، دل ٹکڑے ہو گیا ہے بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ تھی بھیا میرے پردیسی، فاطمہ کہتی تھی بھیا میرے پردیسی، کیسی خبر پائی بھیا میرے پردیسی، صلوات علی محمد وآل محمد، اللہم صل علی محمد وآل
السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکم یا فاطمۃ الزہرا سید نساء العالمین، السلام علیکم یا حسن متبع، السلام علیکم یا ابا عبداللہ وعلی ارواح التي حلت بفنائک، علیکم منی جمیعا سلام اللہ ابدا ما بقیت وبقی اللیل والنہار ولا جعل اللہ الآخر عہد منی لزیارتکم، السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی بن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی اصحاب الحسین وأخي أبو الفضل العباس وأختك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة جميعا رحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء، وفقنا الله زيارتك يا مولا ورزق الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة. السلام عليك وعلى فاطمة المعصومة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علیکم یا صاحب الزمان، السلام علیکم یا شریک القرآن، السلام علیکم یا کعبۃ الایمان، السلام علیکم یا امام انس و جان، السلام علیکم اہل بیت نبوہ ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ مع الصلوات اللہ. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. اللہم کل ولیک الحجۃ ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توأ وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل